but I think there's a big difference between understanding something and doing something. It's sort of like learning how to swim by watching YouTube videos. And I feel like with leadership, it's very much the same. A lot of leaders could read books, they could watch YouTube videos, they could take courses, they could read about something, but there's a difference between knowing you need to do something and actually doing it. And I think that's part of where the challenge is why aren't we doing it more? So
rules of leadership that have worked so far will not be effective in future. So how to be future-proof leader? Do you have what it takes to be an effective leader in the next 10 years? Will AI and technology be able to replace leadership? And what are the key skills and behaviors you must have in order to be a future-proof leader? Today, we will be talking all things leadership and most importantly, the future of leadership. Welcome to another episode of the Being Yourself show, where world's renowned thought leaders and best-selling authors share their wisdom and insight to help you achieve your goals and be more productive and a better version of yourself. If you are new to this channel, then do consider subscribing. Today, we have a leadership expert on the show who has a 4-time best-selling author, speaker, and futurist, who has interviewed 140 CEOs from very large corporations and have talked about leadership and how it is changing in today's extremely fast changing world. His research on leadership is supported by surveys done with more than 14,000 employees from the top firms. And all of this insight he has put together in a book, and he has come up with 9 skills and behaviors and mindsets that one needs in order to be a future-proof leader. So please welcome the best-selling author of his 4th book, The Future Leader, and the founder of the Future of Work University, Jacob Morgan. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. The first question is, I would love to learn what inspired you to study leadership and write books.
That's pretty easy. I got inspired by working for bad leaders. And I never had a job that I really liked, at least a full-time job working for somebody else. So I wanted to write a book to try to solve my own problem. I wanted to write a book that one of the leaders that I used to work for, I imagined in my head that I would be giving them this book, teaching them how to become a good leader. And so I always wanted to work for an organization where I genuinely felt proud to be there. I wanted to work for leaders that really cared about me. And unfortunately, I never had that experience. So that's when I first started thinking about leadership and how these types of leaders got in positions of power. How could I not be this kind of a leader in my career? And that's really where it came from, just having unfortunate jobs working in the corporate world. And that's what piqued my interest in leadership and trying to understand how these bad leaders got into their positions and how can we create organizations where people genuinely want to show up to work each day. And I think a lot of that starts from leaders.
Out of curiosity, did you get a chance to give the book to them?
No, I did not, but I saw one of them at an airport once. Very, very awkward. This was, I think, last year. I was waiting to board a flight, I think in Oakland. And from behind me, I hear somebody say, Jacob. And I turn around and it's this guy that I used to work for. And he's the one that made me go get him coffee when I was working for him many years ago in downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah. And
he says, I've seen a lot of your videos that you've done online where you talk about having to go get coffee for an executive that you worked with. And I was kind of like, yeah, I don't remember. I've done so many of these different types of, so I was kind of like playing it off, but I could hear him talking to his friends and being like, did you see that guy over there? Like, I made him get me coffee. So I could hear him like talk. So it was weird. It was awkward.
Yeah.
But no, I never actually gave the book to any of them. I would like to one day. Now that I live in LA and I moved back to LA and I used to work in LA, that first job that I had, maybe I'll run into one of these people again and I'll be like, hey, by the way, here's a signed copy for you in case you want to.
They might have read it already.
You never know. I think the company that I used to work for since rebranded a couple of times. I don't know what happened to them, even if they're still in business, but yeah, it was just unfortunate. But I suppose it's also a good thing because had I worked for an organization that I truly loved, I probably would have never become an entrepreneur. I would have never written any books. I would have never been doing the things that I'm doing now. So, one of the things that I find very interesting from a lot of successful entrepreneurs that I've interviewed, I have a separate podcast with my wife called the Be Your Own Boss podcast. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I always find fascinating when we interview successful entrepreneurs is that they become successful entrepreneurs because they solve their own problem. They create a product that they wish they had. They solve a problem that they personally have, that lots of other people have. And so that's kind of what happened in my case, is I wanted to solve a problem that I had, and that was not finding good leaders and good organizations to work for. And that's really where the book came from, or the idea from the book, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and it is an interesting read, and we'll go into that. But you've asked this question to nearly 140 CEOs. What is the definition of leadership? Now, I want to know from you, what is the concise version from all that study, that what is your definition of leadership? And more importantly, what is the definition of a leader for future?
So one of the things that I found from interviewing all these business leaders is that leadership is a very subjective thing. I would interview some leaders at very successful organizations, like, for example, Hans Vestberg, the CEO of Verizon Communications, 170,000 employees or something like that. And some CEOs like Hans, who, by the way, very, very successful CEO, multi-billion-dollar company. He's respected in his industry. So nothing bad to say about Hans. But his definition of leadership was very, and I don't remember exactly what it was word for word, but it was more on results, achieving the goals and the vision of the business. So it was a little bit more business focused. Mm-hmm. And then I would interview other CEOs like Bernard Tyson, who recently passed away, the former CEO of Kaiser. Or I would interview Cheryl Palmer, the CEO of Taylor Morrison, a home building company, or Hubert Joly, the CEO of Best Buy. And a lot of those other CEOs would give me definitions of leadership that were more people focused, helping people achieve their greatest, helping people do things that they couldn't do, coaching other, so there, I got very, very different definitions of leadership, ranging from the very corporate business achieving results to helping people as individuals be the best that they can be. And it was funny because both those CEOs on each end of the spectrum are very successful, and so are the people who are in the middle of that. So I found that leadership is a very, very subjective thing, and it's okay. But really why this is important is because your definition of leadership is going to set the type of corporate culture that you create. And every organization has a different corporate culture, and not every corporate culture is good for every person. But if you want to find an organization that is a good fit for you as an employee, as an individual, it's going to depend on how that leader defines corporate culture. So you might work for a CEO who says leadership is about driving performance, it's about ROI, it's about growing the business, it's about being number one. And so the corporate culture in that kind of environment is going to be very competitive. It's going to be very numbers driven. It's going to be very much about dollars and cents. And you might want to be a part of that corporate culture because chances are it'll pay you very well. It'll be very competitive. It'll be very exciting. It'll be very engaging and challenging, long hours, right? Kind of like working for Netflix. But that's not an environment for everybody. Working for Netflix is not a corporate culture that a lot of people would be okay with. And similarly, if you work for another CEO or another business leader who says leadership is about coaching others, it's about helping you be the best version of yourself, that might be a better fit for you as an individual, where you know that somebody has your back. It might not be as a competitive environment. It might not be as fast paced. I mean, who knows, right? But you want to work for a corporate culture, for an organization that aligns with your values, with how you define leadership. So the point is that it's not necessarily good or bad, but it changes the culture. It changes what the organization actually looks like. And in some cases, it can be bad, right? In some cases, it can be good. In some cases, we've seen organizations driven into the ground because business leaders were so focused on dollars and cents, they ignored their people. So as far as what I think a good definition of leadership is, I think it's a balance. I think it's, and I gave a definition in the book, but I think it's a balance between creating a better world, having a vision and seeing that you can create a better world, a better organization. It's getting people to move in the direction of that vision. It's putting people first while you achieve that vision. And I think it's a combination of looking at the business, and it's also a combination of helping and focusing on the people who are helping grow that business. So I think that's probably the best way that I can think about how I would define leadership. Creating that better vision, getting people to move in the direction of that vision.
Yeah,
it's
so
probably
I think
a
it's
great place to start.
yeah, and it's really important when somebody goes and joins a company. It's good to understand the core values of the companies, which is generally overlooked when somebody is applying to
Yeah.
firm. They don't look into what are the core values of that company and whether or not you are aligned with those core values. And I realized
Yeah.
the companies do show their core values. Well, not all employees do even remember
Yep.
what those are, but those who do,
Yep.
especially the leaders, they demonstrate those values. And it's really a good idea to read about them from their website and understand, what kind of culture I'm going to get in this
Yeah,
company.
and your definition of leadership could change depending on your experiences. So I've talked to some leaders who were very much focused on dollars and cents, and then they had to lead their organization through a crisis, whether it's COVID or whether it was a hurricane or an earthquake or some sort of natural disaster, or something bad happens, and then they see how people come together. And all of a sudden, you talk to this CEO, you talk to this business leader, and the way they think about leadership is different. They no longer prioritize just dollars and cents. They focus on community. They focus on people. They focus on impacting communities in a positive way. So sometimes your experiences will change the way that you think about and define leadership. So it's important not just to have a definition of leadership and assume that that's it forever, but you can revisit this maybe every 6 months, maybe every year, and think about how what you experienced during that year, or maybe you have experiences working for somebody, and because you worked for them, that shapes your definition of leadership. It's important to revisit this on an ongoing basis to see how it's evolving and changing over time, because it absolutely will.
Yeah, and for that you wrote a book about the future leader. And
yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me 10, 15 years ago, what makes a great leader, I would say somebody who creates a profitable business, somebody who's growing an organization, somebody who's number one in their space, somebody who's doing all these, types of things that you would associate with stereotypical leadership. And you ask me that question today, and I would say, oh man, that's totally off base, because you could be growing a business, but doing it at the expense of the communities in which you serve. You could grow a business, but do it at the expense of the people who work there, or not treating your customers well, or hurting the environment, or practicing unethical business practices. So today, I'm very much about putting your people first and taking care of your people so that your people can then take care of your customers and your prospects. And that to me is what true leadership is about. It's serving others and helping people be better versions of themselves.
So based on your experience and the interviews that you have done, do the leaders of today realize that they need to change their approach? All of them do realize it? Or, what are the key challenges they face with the traditional approach about leadership?
There are a few. I mean, the interesting thing is that a lot of the leaders I've spoken to told me that leadership is changing. They understand that it's changing. They understand that they can't use the same outdated practices that they've been using over the last 10, 15, 20, 50 years. But when we surveyed the nearly 14,000 employees, which I did in partnership with LinkedIn, and when we asked a lot of those employees how well they thought their mid and senior level executives were practicing the mindsets and skill sets that I talk about in the book, the vast majority of them said their leaders are doing a pretty terrible job. So, it's one of those things where leaders are talking about it, but they're not so much practicing it. And this could be to a couple of reasons why this gap exists. It's not so much that leaders don't understand that they need to change, but I think there's a big difference between understanding something and doing something. It's sort of like learning how to swim by watching YouTube videos. If I've never gotten into the pool and I've watched a million YouTube videos about how to swim, I could explain to you how to swim. I could tell you about the best breaststroke. I could tell you how to freestyle. I could tell you everything. But it doesn't mean that I actually know how to do it, and it doesn't mean that I'm practicing it. And I feel like with leadership, it's very much the same. A lot of leaders could read books, they could watch YouTube videos, they could take courses, they could read about something, but there's a difference between knowing you need to do something and actually doing it. And I think that's part of where the challenge is why aren't we doing it more? So, this could be due to a number of things. number one, there are probably some leaders out there who genuinely just don't understand that leadership is changing. They don't have a grasp of that. There's some leaders out there who are probably scared of what change means. There are a lot of leaders out there who might say, well, I'm not incentivized to change. My company rewards me based on performance. My company incentivizes me based on the deals that I close, based on how many projects I bring in. They don't incentivize me on practicing empathy. They don't incentivize me to coach others. So why would I do these things? So you certainly have a lot of organizations where there's no incentive on why or how you should think differently as the leader. I think a lot of organizations also have very poor leadership training and development programs. One of the things that I found is that on average, somebody might become a leader at some point in their 20s, but not get any formal leadership training until they're in their 30s or 40s. So you're going like 10, 15, 20 years as a leader before you're actually taught how to lead, which is crazy. So there are a whole number of reasons for why these gaps can exist. But I think the big point is that they do exist and we need to close them.
This is interesting. How do you quantify then these kind of things like empathy and coaching and those kind of stuff, which does not have a material view to it?
Well, you ask the people that that work for that leader. So I think part of it, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, is defining what does it mean to be a great leader. And if part of being a great leader, you have those characteristics and qualities. Like in my book, I have a lot of mindset. I have 4 mindsets and 5 skill sets. Mm-hmm. And the mindsets include things like balancing humanity and technology. They include things like curiosity and having a growth mindset. Skill sets include thinking like a futurist, where you think in terms of scenarios and possibilities. They include things like coaching and mentoring others, listening and communication. So if I was running a big company and I wanted to measure these things, I would ask my employees questions based on these mindsets and skill sets. I would say, look, part of what it means to be a successful leader at this organization is to practice these 4 mindsets and these 5 skills. So I would come up with a question or 2 for each one of those and ask my employees. So for example, if you want to ask empathy, you could say, the last time you went and you talked to your leader and you brought up something, how well do you think your leader was able to connect with you and understand your perspective? How well do you think your leader was able to look at the problem or the situation from your lens as opposed to their perspective? I mean, that's a great way to ask a question about empathy. If you want to look at self-awareness, same thing. You can ask a leader, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What motivates them? What excites them? And then ask an employee about their leader and see, sorry, dog's barking, and see if the employee's perspective aligns with the leader's perspective. So in other words, does the leader view themselves in the same way that other people view that leader? So there are lots of different questions you can ask, or you can have dialogues. You can measure these things in all sorts of different ways. The same way that you measure anything on an annual employee engagement survey or an annual performance review.
And then you can find a way to relate that with the overall performance and productivity of the team and the firm to give
I mean, and that's what I would incentivize. If leaders are not doing a good job of the key qualities that we think as an organization are important, then they either need to be trained in those areas, or they need to be told that if they don't practice those things, they're not going to be able to be a part of the company.
Yeah, there are a lot of young people who watch my shows, and people get confused between leadership and management. So how do you define the difference between the two?
Yeah, this has been a very, very much an ongoing debate in an area of conversation, I feel like, for many, many years. And you do need both. So it's hard to say that, everybody should be a leader, nobody should be a manager. But I think what we've seen now is that in order to be in a position where you are leading others, where you are responsible for others, right? A stereotypical manager, you have to be a leader. You have to be able to do both. In other words, if you want to be in a position where you are responsible for others, where you are responsible for P&L, where you have responsibility of a team or an organization, not only do you need to understand the business aspects of that, but you also need to understand the leadership piece, the coaching, the mentoring, the soft skill pieces. You have to be able to do both. But stereotypically, everybody always views a manager as somebody who's like, telling others what to do, commanding control, delegating, and everybody always views a leader as somebody who sets the vision and who's able to come up with the big picture ideas and inspire and motivate others. But my argument is that if you want to be in a position where you are responsible for others, you have to be able to do both. So you can see that why, if you're running a business, you need both. So for example, I run a team of 12 people, and as somebody who's running a team of 12 people, I very much need to be aware of the cost of the business. I need to be aware of the productivity, the efficiency, how long it takes to do certain things. Like I have to manage certain processes. Mm-hmm. I have to be able to create those processes, talk to my team about those processes. Like that's very much the management aspect, right? Keeping the ship. So I guess if I was kind of using an analogy, it would be leadership is more setting the direction of where the ship is going and trying to get everybody to move in the direction, or trying to get the ship to move in the direction of that vision. And management is more along the lines of making sure that while the ship is on that journey, everything is working. You know what I mean? Like there's enough fuel, there's enough food, everybody's working so that the ship gets to that destination. Mm-hmm. So if I were to use an analogy, that's kind of the way that I would think about it. But again, you need both of those things. So you need to be able to have the lens to do both. But the point is that you can't, there used to be a time where if you were responsible for others, you didn't have to do that second piece. You didn't have to be able to set the vision or motivate or do anything. You really just needed to focus on the management, and you would be put into a position of power. Like if you could make sure that everybody on the ship had enough food, that the engine was taken care of. Like if you could do those things, they would say, hey, you get a promotion, you could be a leader. So the big argument that I'm making now is that if you want to be in a position where you are responsible for other people or a team or an organization, you not only need to be able to get the ship to reach its destination, but you also need to be able to shape that destination, create that vision, engage, motivate, and inspire people, and also do those management stuff pieces as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so you just mentioned about curiosity as a leadership mindset just now. And you've also mentioned the work of Francesca Gino, the Harvard professor, in your book as well. So I just wanted to understand, what is your take on curiosity, how it is linked to leadership? And just give us some examples of who's a curious leader in your opinion.
Sure. So curiosity, and I mentioned a couple of studies in the book, one from Thomas Kasdan, who did a big curiosity study. I think it was with Merck. In curiosity, to me, I have two kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. Or he's going to be, he's 17 months now. And for me, curiosity is like playing around with things, being able to ask questions, not being scared. It's, it's tinkering. And I feel like the younger we are, the better we are at doing that. And the older we get, the more we are told not to do those things. The more we are taught that it's not important to be curious, it's important to be right. And if you create an organization, or if you create an educational institution where the number one goal is just to be right, people aren't going to ask questions. They're going to be scared to fail. They're going to be scared to test out new ideas, because innovation comes from being wrong. Being a great leader comes from being wrong. And all the leaders that I've interviewed have told me many times that they were wrong. They've made mistakes, whether it was with hiring or creating a new business or creating a new product or service. Lots of successful leaders are wrong all the time. And we need to encourage our employees to speak up, to ask questions, to challenge us, to not be scared to come forward with any ideas if they have them, if they see there's a mistake. Like it's having a little bit of that childlike wonder, that childlike curiosity, not being scared to ask questions. So I really think that that's kind of what curiosity is about. It very much emulates being like a kid in some ways. And why this is important is because we live in a world that changes quickly, and we always have. But the pace of change is increasing more and more. We're seeing more change, more disruption, more questions, more uncertainty. And in that kind of an environment, the organizations who are going to win, the leaders who are going to be the most successful, are the ones who are going to play around with the most number of ideas, right? If you live in a world that's changing so quickly, you can't just assume that what worked in the past is going to work in the future. So you have to test out new ideas, create new products, create new services. You're going to fail a lot of the times. And so curiosity really makes for effective leadership, because you'll test out new ways to lead a team, new way to motivate and engage your people. You will test out all sorts of new things to see what's working and what isn't. For example, look at this, the impact that that COVID has had on hybrid work. So, it's really forcing us to think differently about what it means to be an employee, a leader, and what it means to work in general. So you need to be nimble and agile in your thinking. You have to be curious to explore and test out new ways of getting things done, because a lot of the workplace practices that we have been around for 50 to 100 years. And the world looked very, very different back then. So curiosity is very much tied to leadership.
And I think Google is one such example, because I think they have some sort of target that this percentage of our ideas are going to fail, but they'll do it anyway. So I think that's a
yeah. Look, I mean, I have a small business. I have things that I do all the time that fail. It could be a product that I create. It could be a service that I offer. It could be a promotion that I'm trying to do. It could be something that I write. I mean, I have little failures, I would say, on a weekly basis. And I would say I have a couple of big failures every year. But the thing is, you learn from those. And it's just like, I play a lot of competitive chess. And one of the things that any chess player will tell you is that you learn far more from your losses than you do from your wins. Because when you play a game of chess, I'm talking about like a classical, a long game of chess across the, over the board with somebody else. When you lose that game, it stays with you for a while, and you will never make those same mistakes again. But if you don't make those mistakes, you're not going to learn. You're not going to know. And so this is why curiosity is so important, because it's very much analogous to chess, where eventually you're going to play a game of chess and you're going to be in a new position, new scenario, new situation, a new opponent. And you're not going to know what to do. And you're going to have to rely on your intuition. You're going to have to rely on pattern recognition. You're going to have to rely on your ability to like calculate different scenarios. And you know what? You're going to make mistakes a lot of the times. But you will learn from those mistakes so that you don't make them again in the future. And that's where curiosity comes from. And if you do not have curiosity, you will not fail. You will not make mistakes. You will not grow. You will not learn. You will not develop. And I think eventually you'll become obsolete.
Yeah, and so that's one way of learning, by doing and failing. But you also mentioned a lot about something called perpetual learning in the book. And that's about the approach and the structure of how people should learn new skills and behaviors. And I was just thinking how difficult it is today, even though you have so much of resources available for free, just a click away from you. But your learning, if it is not structured, you're like inundated with so much of information and knowledge, but you don't know what to do with it, right? So what should be the approach for learning? And just explain this concept that you had about super perpetual learning in the book also that you mentioned.
Yeah, for me, what I've learned over the years is that you can't rely on educational institutions or in your company to teach you everything you need to know to be successful personally or professionally. I studied economics and psychology in school. I can't remember much of what I've used from school in my life, really. I had to learn a lot of new things along the way as I became an entrepreneur. And I had to learn things by watching YouTube videos, by reading, by meeting with people and talking to them. Like I had to teach myself a lot of the skills and mindsets and techniques and behaviors that I needed to know if I wanted to be successful in what I'm doing. And I think the same thing is true in the corporate world. And again, this is whether you're an entrepreneur or not, you have to take more accountability over your personal and professional development. You can't say, well, my company's not teaching me anything, or I didn't learn this in school, therefore I can't do it. It's, as you mentioned, there's so many resources available that if you want to learn something or you want to know something, you do it. I mean, I was with my 5-year-old the other day and she said, Daddy, how do I draw a picture of a rabbit? I have no idea how to draw a picture of a rabbit. We went onto YouTube, we typed in, draw a picture of a rabbit. And she drew a picture of a rabbit by watching a YouTube video. So, I mean, she's 5. So as an adult, whether you're looking to learn leadership or programming or how to repave your driveway, how to start a fire, whatever it is, you have access to so much information that's out there. And there's really no excuse. And as far as structuring, so many educational institutions out there, whether you look at Harvard or Stanford, they've created all the structures for you. You can get access to the syllabus. You can get access to all the courses that they've put out there. Like, it's all done. You just have to search for these things. If you want to learn coding and you want to create like a training program for yourself, Google free training coding boot camp, and you will find people and I've done this. You will find people who've created agendas for you. They've created structures for you, links to videos for you. All you got to do is click and watch. But I think the important thing is we're moving a lot towards this kind of idea of micro learning, where if you're in a situation and you need to learn something, it could be something quick. How do you merge cells in an Excel file? You could easily find out how to do that. Or how to, you think of anything, how to launch a podcast, how to edit something. You can find these little micro learning modules out there for pretty much anything that you need. The point is that you just need to be able to go out there and find them and to use them and to actually apply them, which is the most important piece.
So coming back to the mindsets that you have in the book, the one that I really kind of liked is the chef mindset. You also had servant and global citizen, but I just wanted to know more, and to our audience, what is a chef mindset and how a leadership, how it shows kind of leadership skills.
Sure. The mindset of the chef is all about balancing humanity and technology, meaning that we get very obsessed with technology. We always want to chase the shiny new thing, the new Apple Watch, the new phone. We get very, very obsessed with technology, which is understandable. Technology is cool. But as a leader, and even just as an employee inside of an organization, you want to make sure that you balance the technology with the human aspect of work. Because we need to remember that business is still fundamentally about relationships. It's about people, it's about interactions, it's about connection. And if you only focus on the technology piece and you neglect the human piece, you're going to find that you're going to create an organization where you're not able to attract and retain the best people. So the mindset of the chef is making sure that you're constantly aware of that balance between using technology to connect people and also making sure that you're building those human relationships, that trust, that psychological safety, doing good, the human aspect of business. And that's an important balance to have, because you don't want to skew towards too much towards one or the other.
Yeah. And I think in the later half of the book, when you talk about the skills, those skills are helping you to achieve the mindsets that you talk in the first section, and I can see the correlation now. So let's talk about those skills a little bit. So one you had, I think, futurist and Yoda, which I really liked, about emotional intelligence, and in that you talk about self-awareness, which is something really important in now in current world. And can you give us some example of a self-aware leader and how
Sure.
they choose to grow themselves and their firm by just being self-aware, just for example?
Yeah, self-awareness is, and I'll give you an example of, this is something that a leader shared with me. And this was one leader who told me that he used to do a lot of meetings with his employees where they would pitch new ideas to him. They would, for new products, new services, new things that they wanted to do. And during these meetings, they would create these presentations and they would block off a bunch of time and they would present all their ideas to the CEO. And what would happen is that within like 5 to 10 minutes of listening to these presentations, the CEO would be like, okay, you can stop, go ahead, go do whatever, go run with the idea. I don't need to hear the rest of it. You're good. I believe, just go. And he thought that he was doing this really great job, right? In his mind, he was like, oh, I'm giving my employees more trust, more autonomy, more accountability. I'm letting them run with their ideas. And then he was doing these surveys where he asked his employees about his leadership style. And a lot of his employees said, you know what, you're very dismissive. You don't value our opinion. You don't value our feedback. You don't value our ideas. And he's sitting there thinking like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just letting all of you guys go with your ideas. And his employees were like, yeah, but we spend a lot of time in these presentations and we want to walk you through them. And you only let us present for 5 to 10 minutes and then you stop us and just tell us, to run with it. Whereas we, we want to walk you through everything because we spend a lot of time and effort and energy into creating these things for you. We want to present them to you. And so that's a very good example of a leader who thought he was doing or acting one way, where his employees viewed what he was doing as something completely different. Mm-hmm. So this is why being self-aware is important, because had he never asked his employees, he would keep doing this, thinking that he's this great leader and he's giving employees trust and accountability. And his employees would keep thinking that he's very dismissive and doesn't value their ideas and feedback. So self-awareness means that as a leader, not only are you aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, but you're aware of how other people perceive you, because perception is reality. And you may think that you are doing one thing and your people will think of what you're doing in a completely different light. So that's why self-awareness is so crucial. Constantly working on yourself, understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, surrounding yourself by people who can complement you, and making sure that other people's perceptions of you align with your perceptions of yourself.
So how can you promote that culture in your firm?
So how do you promote self-awareness?
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a couple of things that you can do. So first, you have a more open and transparent dialogue about these things. And I've done workshops with a lot of executives at organizations where I would ask them to write down their strengths and weaknesses, ask them a series of questions. Then I would pair them up with somebody else at the company, and I would have that other person answer the same questions about that leader. And we would always find that the results were very, very different. So part of it is you get to know your employees, you get to know each other as human beings and as individuals, not just as workers, not just as somebody who's there doing a job, but somebody who has hopes and ideas and fears and passions. Like, you have to get to know people as human beings, not just as workers. The second thing that you can do is you spend time with people who are not like you, from different cultures, different backgrounds, different seniority levels. Get out of your bubble, so to speak, and have more of these conversations, have more dialogue with other people who are not like you, because I think that's going to teach you a lot about yourself. And, it'll teach other people a lot about you as well. Probably another thing that you can do to practice self-awareness is you can do these exercises on a regular basis. Or maybe every quarter you ask yourself a series of questions about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, etc. Then you can go up to some of your employees and have them answer the same questions about you as well. You can do this in an individual setting. You can do this as a workshop, as a group, and see where those responses align, if they do align. So those are probably some places that I would use to start. Trying to think what else. Self-awareness. Part of, I think, also self-awareness is embracing failure. Is understanding mistakes. When you make mistakes, what you learn from those mistakes, I think, is also going to be very important. So it's really hard to have self-awareness without failure, because you will make mistakes. I think another thing that you can do is you can have some sort of a trusted advisor inside your organization. It could be a peer, it could be a coworker, it could be a leader, somebody who's going to be brutally honest with you about something when you go ask them. So for example, you might be in a meeting and somebody in that meeting might bring something up and you might respond in a certain way, and then the meeting's over. You need to have somebody who you can go to after the meeting and say, hey, you know what? Did you hear what Erica said? Was she being rude, or was it just me? Like, somebody who can give you that honest feedback and say, actually, Jacob, she was fine. I think, it was just you. I didn't hear anything wrong with what she said. So having somebody who you can pair up with, so to speak, and have that kind of a trusted advisor inside your organization, I think, is probably also probably pretty helpful. I've also talked to a lot of leaders who work with coaches or advisors. I've talked to a lot of leaders who are very active in, it could be either physical journaling or just mental journaling, reflecting, planning, going over how the day went, different situations they came up, who they talked to. So I think all those things can be pretty useful.
So it's kind of reflection, transparency, and communication. I was like,
yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were kind of jumping from one skill to the another from the book. But anyways,
no, it's all good.
In the last 2 years, things have changed drastically, and going forward, most of the companies are going to keep hybrid way of working. How does that impact the overall way leaders do behave and interact with their employees, and how it has changed in the 2 years when we were like in complete lockdown? And how do you think it is going to go when we come back to hybrid version of working?
So first of all, I think hybrid work is great. I've talked about this for many years, and for me, hybrid work is not about virtual or physical. It's about having a flexible environment where it's a combination of both. That's basically what hybrid means, right? It's some virtual and some physical. So maybe you work in the office 1 day a week or 3 days a week or a couple hours here, a couple hours there. But the point is, it's not just virtual. It's not just in person. So what this means as far as leadership goes is that a lot of leaders, I feel like, are very used to leading a team or leading people when it's in person. You can stop by somebody's desk, you can give an all hands meeting, you can stand on a stage and present to people. And that certainly has its way of leading. I mean, that's how most leaders learn how to lead, right? You practice communication, body language, all the typical things that you would usually do. But then in a virtual environment, it's very different, because I've actually seen a lot of leaders who are very charismatic and they're very great at delivering their message in person, but you put them in a virtual environment and all of a sudden they're like reading a script and it's totally different. And you think, is this the same person? Like this looks like a totally different leader. So it is different because you're looking at a camera, you're looking at a little dot on your screen. You have to pay attention to different things now, like having a good quality microphone, having a good quality camera, paying attention to the lighting, making sure that you can still deliver your message and get your point across in a technology, in a virtual world instead of an in-person world where you don't have body language. You're not making eye contact with other people. So there are some different qualities and different characteristics that leaders need to focus on to lead in a virtual world. It's just like for me as a professional speaker, when I'm on a stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people versus if I'm looking at a dot on a camera, it's different. So you have to be able to learn how to do both. And I think that's something that a lot of leaders forget. They assume that if they can lead in a physical world, they can lead in a virtual world. And that's not true. It's a very different way to lead.
And talking about technology, a lot of stuff that management, that comes under the definition of management, doing things better, be more productive, be more efficient, has been taken over by artificial intelligence. How about leadership? Is it going to be in future, a lot of machines are going to do the job of a leader? Will that be a possibility, do you think?
Not in the foreseeable future, no. I mean, I think that a lot of technology is augmenting the decision-making piece for humans as far as helping them decide what should they be investing in, how much money should they put where should they open up a factory, how many people should be on the team, stuff that requires data and analysis, all that sort of stuff. I think AI is going to do far better and far more effective than humans. But as far as motivating and engaging and empowering people and setting a vision, I don't think that's something that we're going to see replaced by technology anytime in the near future. I think that's still very much a fundamental human skill and a human attribute. So I think this is why one of the things that I say in my book is that if you can focus on those things, the human aspect of leadership, your value to any organization is going to increase tenfold. But if all you do is focus on the command and control and delegating and telling other people what to do, eventually you're going to be replaced because that's something that technology can do. So focus on the human aspects of leadership. I think that's the most valuable thing anyone can do.
Yeah, but see, the AI-powered machines like robots, they are so smart and they are able to take decisions based on the information that had been fed into them. And some of the examples that I saw from some of the Japanese companies who launched some robots who were giving you like proper advice. I mean, you can ask Siri, for example, I am in I have to decide something. Can you help me? And then it'll give you some sort of answer, right? So maybe in 10, 20 years, they will be smart enough to tell you what is right, what is wrong. They'll help you in decision-making. Who knows?
Yeah. But decision-making is one thing, but helping you to want to move in the direction of that decision is another thing. So for example, look at like an athlete or any team that's out there. So to me, I think of like, can I ever envision a world in which a robot is coaching an NBA team, or a robot is coaching a tennis superstar like Serena or Venus Williams? And not in the near future, no. I mean, I can imagine AI telling Serena or Venus or NBA team, where should you be taking most of your shots? Where are your opponents most weak? How should you be setting up your team based on the team that you're playing? So stuff like that. But can I imagine a piece of software going out there and saying, come on, guys, you're down by 10 points. We're in the fourth quarter. You can do it. Or, you're down by a couple sets, or you're down by a couple points. You can get back in this game, helping people mentally get to where they need to be so that they can be successful. That I can't imagine in the foreseeable future. Maybe long term, possibly, but not in the near future.
Yeah. The first part is actually happening. There are companies who
it is, yeah,
personally know that they have certain equipments that they're put on the court, especially in tennis and badminton, and they analyze every single move and tell you.
Yeah, they do it. They do it in baseball. They do it in they do it in a lot of different sports, right? Depending on who you're playing, who's pitching, who's starting, you can set up your team in a different way. Where should you be shooting from? Where are you having the most accuracy? Like all that sort of stuff is data, it's analytics, it's stuff that I think computers are going to do a very good job at. But again, you're not going to see a piece of software motivating a team that's down by 10 in the fourth quarter, trying to get them to rally to come back to win the NBA championship. Like, that's not something a piece of software is going to do. That's going to be something that a human's going to do, a coach is going to do, with stories, connections. That's the kind of stuff that people are good at.
Yeah, although the robots can take part in the competitions themselves.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the distant future. But I think for now, I've yet to meet anybody who is engaged or empowered or inspired by something that a robot tells them.
Of course. Okay, so Jacob, out of those 140 CEOs that you've interviewed, they told you a lot of different skills and behaviors that they have. You put 9 of them together here. What is the number one skill? Just number one skill out of all your interviews with them, you think is the most valuable of all? Just one.
Unfortunately, and this is a very common question I get, unfortunately, you can't pick one, because that's part of why I wrote the book, is because you need all 4 mindsets and all 5 skills. Mm-hmm. So picking one, for example, you can't just know how to practice emotional intelligence, but not be good at listening and communication or coaching and mentoring others. You're still not going to be a good leader. I don't care how much empathy you have. So the whole point is that you need to practice all 4 mindsets and all 5 skills. I know it's kind of a cheating answer to your question, but it's true. You can't just focus on one.
Fair enough. They all work together. There might be a new name of all of them together, which is like 9. What do you call them?
The Notable 9.
Notable 9. Yeah. So that's the one name. Okay, great. Yep. Okay, Jacob, there's one question that I ask all my guests, which is, what according to you are the top 3 skills or behaviors that we must have that schools are not teaching?
It's interesting enough, I do talk about these in the book. So one is learning how to learn. I don't think schools teach that. Schools teach you how to find out what the right answer is, but they don't teach you how to actually learn new things and apply the things that you learn. I think a second one is emotional intelligence. Unless you're specifically studying emotional intelligence at school, this isn't something that's encouraged. And I think a third one that is very important is also curiosity. That we talked about earlier, is being okay to fail, experimenting, seeking out new solutions and ideas to existing or new problems. So I would say those 3 are probably the ones that come to mind.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And what next now? You've written 4 books, 4 best-selling books. What next?
Next is going to be an next book. So probably find something to explore sometime next year and have a book that comes out either late next year or the year after. We'll see.
Any idea of what topic it is going to be on?
Something related to leadership, but I'm not exactly sure yet. We'll see.
How long did you take to write this book? Or what is the average you take to write one book?
Well, writing is one piece. Doing the research is another one. I think this last one took around 16 months.
Okay.
Something like that, maybe a little less.
Yeah, 16 months. And quite an amazing read, good read. I kind of finished reading it. Can you see it? Well,
I can, yeah. Oh, there it is.
there it is. Yeah.
There it is. Thank you very much.
There. Okay, right. So thank you very much, Jacob, for coming on and sharing a little bit more than just what is in the book. I really enjoyed it. Thanks
My
for coming.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, if you are looking to know more about Jacob, he also has a leadership university on his website. I'll put all the links down here. Please do check out. His book is amazing. It's got all the answers that the CEOs themselves have given is all there in the book. It's a great read. You will enjoy it if you want to. And if you've not yet done so, and if you found some value from this interview, then do consider subscribing to this channel. And I will see you again. Until then, you take care and keep learning.